If you failed the LSAT, does that mean you can't go to law school? Today, we're going to talk about what happens if you do really badly on your LSAT exam and what you can do to still salvage your law school admission goals and dreams and ultimately still go on to have a successful legal career. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sydney Montgomery. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Admissions Consulting, where I specialize in helping first generation and minority applicants through the law school application process. So, what is it that you do if your LSAT score is just not good? And for those of you who are listening and thinking, oh my gosh, maybe she's talking about my LSAT score. I'm going to say, like, if your LSAT score is 140 or less, or, like in the 140s and down. I'm not talking about you if you have a 165. You're going to be all right. But if you're like, I just cannot seem to break out of the 140s or the 130s, what do I do with my LSAT score? How can I still be a lawyer? So 3 things we're going to talk about. 1, we're going to talk about what your immediate game plan is if you still have time in the application cycle. Then we're going to talk about what to do if you don't have time in the application cycle, if it's later, like January or February LSAT, and what you can do for the best long-term success. And then 3, we're going to talk about how you can address this in your application under certain circumstances. And I'm also going to give you some reminders about what rankings and numbers and scores even mean in the grander scheme of things. So let's take a look at that first point, okay? What should you do? Let's say that's your June score, your August score, even maybe your October score. Don't panic. That's the first thing. I want you to really take a hard look at what you were doing to study for the LSAT leading up to that moment. Were you self-studying? Were you using Khan Academy? Were you using a test prep course that maybe wasn't serving you very well? I have a list of my favorite test prep companies and courses on my website. Not to say that others aren't great, but you really want to make sure, because not every company, especially these big companies that do a lot of different kinds of tests, not all of them are really geared towards the LSAT exam. Did you have a tutor that maybe wasn't as good? Were you, if we're going to be honest, were you not really studying? Were you doing an hour a day, an hour and a half a day, 2 hours a day? Were you trying to cram it all in on the weekends? Have you taken the right amount of practice tests? You should have taken at least 10 practice tests before you take the real test. Were you taking the practice tests under the same conditions at the same time in the morning? Were you wearing the same socks that you're going to be wearing? Did you have breakfast? Whatever it is that you can do to control it. Do you have any reason for accommodations? Do you have test anxiety? Do you have focus issues? If you have test anxiety, I'd highly recommend checking out the Mindfulness for Academic Achievement course. It's by my friend Grant Lee Neely, who owns Granite Test Prep. It's $17. And it's a fantastic way for you to incorporate and infuse some mindfulness in your test prep so that you can stay calm under pressure. And especially with, the logic games and the time pressure of the LSAT, staying calm, being able to recoup, knowing when to move on, those are all crucial skills. Do you know what your areas of weakness are? Was it reading comp that really killed you? Or was it the logic games? Or was it logical reasoning? And is there a way that you can work on just that? There is so much to analyze and investigate with your LSAT performance. And sometimes I think students don't really do enough of that deep digging. They're just like, well, I'll just study harder or more. And harder and more is great, but only if it's in a direction that's going to lead to effective outcomes. Harder and more does not equal better outcome if you're, studying the wrong thing harder or you're just doing more of a bad habit. I had a 7th grade teacher, shout out to Miss Robleski, who used to say practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And that really stuck with me, because if you're practicing the wrong thing, you're just reinforcing negative habits. You're just continuing to make the problem bigger. And you really want to make sure that you are practicing good habits, and that is what will lead to a good outcome. So I really want you to take some time to figure out what could be better in your LSAT journey. And for some of you, it's that you just need to invest in the right kind of prep. Because sometimes we like to get a book here, a free thing there, all of these sort of things. And that's not always great, because while that might work for some people, for others it won't. And not only are you losing time by not doing the right kind of LSAT prep, and kind of, bopping around, but you're also maybe learning ineffective methods. You might be learning more than one method. Sometimes students will have so many different books that they're actually competing advice, and then you're kind of spinning your wheels and you're stuck. But honestly, I say invest in test prep is really important, whatever that means to you. But you want to make sure that if this is an area of weakness for you, that you've actually put some, time and money into it, because a high LSAT score can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships. So even if a test prep course is $1,000, which, listen, I worked 3 jobs during Princeton. I worked 2 jobs at Harvard. I've always, come from a working class family, so I understand the financial struggles. I really do. But this $1,000 could really save you hundreds of thousands of dollars later. And, my thing is not to make long-term decisions based on short-term emotions or even short-term circumstances. And so this is a long-term decision that you don't want to say, man, I wish I had just given an extra $500 and really gotten the prep that I needed to really get the score that I needed. So that's the first thing. If you are still with enough time in the cycle, I want you to reevaluate what you did with your LSAT prep and switch gears and try to find prep that was going to work better for you. Make sure if you're consulting with companies or test prep tutors, you are letting them know, this is my weakness, this is where I need help, this is what I'm looking for. You're very forthcoming. This is who I am as a person. I'm not very good with timing, or have executive function issues, or whatever it is, but you're making sure that you find the right prep for you and not just the right price for you. Because let's also be real, if one thing is $1,000 and it works, but one thing is $500 and it doesn't work, you're actually wasting $500. So I don't want you to do that at all. Any dollars that you spend, I want it to actually be helpful for you. And if you're spending dollars and it's not helpful for you, we gotta change that equation. The second thing is, what if you are already late in the cycle? Like, let's say it's December, January, February. What do you do then? I want you to think about what your goals are. Seriously, look at your career goals and think, what is it that I want to accomplish from law school, and how far do I need to go in terms of rankings or in terms of certain schools or geography? So when I say really look at your career goals, that might mean, I'm okay with the schools that I can get into with this score. Sometimes, however, it's, I need to wait. No one loves hearing that. But sometimes the answer is keep studying, don't apply now, wait another year to go to law school. And again, I understand. No one wants to hear that. But again, I don't want you making long-term decisions based on short-term emotions. Your legal career and your legal network is for life. Is the alumni base that you are going to have for the rest of your life. You want to make sure that you are doing the best investment that you can. And if it means waiting one more year, it means waiting one more year. I had a friend who we applied to law school at the same time, and his LSAT score was not great. And he really wanted to go to top tier schools, but he just, wasn't going to be able to do that. And, he had some good options. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is good. And he was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. He took an additional 2 years off to study for the LSAT. When I tell you that he just recently graduated from Harvard Law School, it is such a testament to me about what the power of waiting can do. His life is changed forever. It's such a big deal. And if he had just said, I really want to go to law school right now, so I'm just going to go to this one and it's fine, it would have been a completely different future. And that really showed me, like, if you have a goal and you have a dream and there's a calling on your life and it's saying to do a certain thing, and I'm not saying that Harvard is, what you need to be reaching for or keep waiting until you get to the T14, because I'm not saying that. There are tons of fantastic schools that are regional schools, that are lower ranked schools, some of which are even unranked. The historically black law schools are fantastic. I'm not saying that you have to go to a certain tier of school, but I am saying that sometimes patience is the answer. Waiting, continuing to study, making yourself as ready as possible, you will just be so much happier in your long-term future and your long-term career success. The third thing is, how do you even address this in your application? Well, if you're waiting, hopefully you're able to, score higher, and then most schools don't require an addendum unless there's a huge jump, but if there is, you can, just say that you changed your study materials. But that's typically not really necessary. The situations that I want to talk about are students who perhaps have a history of poor test taking. You didn't do very well on the SATs or the ACTs. However, you have also a history of impeccable academic record. Maybe you have a 4.0 from college. Maybe you're in the Honors Society. Maybe you have also a master's degree, right? But even maybe the GRE didn't go well. So if you have kind of that documented history of poor test taking with a documented history of high academic excellence, that might be something to write about in an addendum. Very briefly, an addenda is not an essay. You can actually see sample addenda and down below if you download my free essential guide to applying to law school. There we go through character and fitness and LSAT GPA addenda. But that might be an opportunity for you to share that in a couple of sentences. Likewise, of course, if there was something that happened leading up to your LSAT, you were in a car accident, you were violently ill, and for whatever reason, you did not cancel the score, you can also explain that if you want an addenda as well. But that is kind of how it shows up. Everyone thinks, oh, if I have a low LSAT, I should write an addenda about it. I mean, it kind of depends on what the reason is. If the reason is just you have a low LSAT score, you don't really need an addenda about that. They don't need to read 4 extra sentences reminding them of that. It's really like, oh no, there's a reason, and it's quite reasonable, and here it is. It's not really an excuse. It's just context for the score. But an addenda doesn't just make the score go away. So, it's important to write one if there's a reason to, but it's still just context. It doesn't completely negate your score. So that's kind of important to remember too. And while we're talking about scores, that fourth point is that I want to really remind you that you are more than a number. Your LSAT score and your GPA, they don't define you. They don't define the limits of what you're able to do in the legal career. They don't define your worth. They don't define your intellect. I think sometimes we put so much stock into them. And I understand, because that's how the system and the application process is set up. But I want you to remember that your self-worth does not come from a number, and your self-worth also does not come from a school. Going to Harvard is not going to make you any more of a worthy attorney than going to UDC. They are both fantastic schools in their own right. They both have their own alumni communities. They both have their own offerings. And whether you choose to go to one or the other, you are still a worthy individual. You haven't changed. You are still you. You are still a person with dreams and goals and passions that I know will come to fruition, and a desire to impact that I know will carry for generations. So you have to remember that you need to just make the best of, your school and where you go, and be proud of it. And you always want to remember that, hey, sometimes going to a lower ranked school that has strong local ties might actually do better for your employment score. And especially if you graduated at the top of your class, that's so much better, and perhaps with even less debt, than going to a top ranked school in a lot of debt, and maybe you're at the middle to the bottom of your class and you're going to have a hard time getting a job. So it's always like a balancing act, right? Just being at a school does not necessarily guarantee you anything. You just might need to have a little more moxie. You might need to hustle a little more at some schools. Get those internships, make that networking happen for you. Get those externships, do those clinics, be on the journal. You're going to have to really hustle, but you can do it because you work hard. So I don't want anyone to be afraid of that. I don't want anyone to say, oh, well, I'm not smart if I can't get into this, or, I need this to prove that I'm, smart. You don't need anything to prove that you're smart. If you're looking for validations from degrees, as someone who has them, I will tell you, it's not going to come from that. Your validation and your self-worth come from within you. It's something that you have in here. What you're able to do in the law, that is not defined by any one school. There have been fantastic change makers and policy makers and such great leaders for social justice movement who have come from every single type of law school. You decide what your future is, not a school. You decide what you're going to go out and grab and get. Because if it's for you, you better be getting it. And I don't care what kind of platform you have to springboard from. So I just want to remind you that you're so much more than your numbers. You're so much more than your LSAT score. And even if your LSAT score is really bad, it's really not what you want, it doesn't mean that this dream has to end. So hopefully this video was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments. Email me. Where are you in the process? What scores are you struggling with? Where do you want to find that increase? And what have you been doing to try to change up your test prep methods? Make sure that you're subscribed to my channel and like this video. Share it with your friends. I'd love to see you tag me on Instagram at @SMontgomery Consulting. And I will see you guys very soon.